Known by most as Sarah, I have been a dentist for more than 20 years. Though the road to get here wasn't simple, I adore this line of work. Sitting in my office gazing at the framed certificate on the wall, I find myself thinking back on the turbulent road that brought me to this place. Growing up in a family where I constantly felt like the second choice, Jack and Linda, my parents, never tried to keep their inclination for my younger sister Emily secret. She was born when I was 10, and it was obvious from then on who the preferred child was. When I decided on college, I knew I wanted to work in dentistry. Since I was a small child, it had been my goal, captivated by the way my pediatric dentist could make even the most terrifying surgeries seem like magic. "Mom, Dad, I'm approved for State University's dental program." Just barely able to control my enthusiasm, I declared one evening at dinner. The quiet that followed was absolutely deafening. My father catched his voice clearly. "That's great, Sarah, but you know we cannot afford that. We are saving for Emily's coming future." I thought of myself as having been gutly pounded. "Still, but I have put so much effort in this. I have perfect scores," I realized. "You thought wrong," my mother said, her voice icy. "We have always been really open about our priorities. Emily is looking forward a brilliant future. Well, I'm sure you will find something appropriate." Tears running down my face, I hurried left the table. The next day, I visited my grandparents, Robert and Margaret. They'd always been kinder to me, more understanding. When I told them what happened, my grandfather's face turned red with anger. "Those fools," he muttered. "Don't you worry, Sarah. We'll make sure you get to that school." True to their word, my grandparents scraped together every penny they could to help me with tuition. I worked multiple jobs, studied harder than I ever had before, and eventually graduated at the top of my class. During my final year of dental school, I met Tom. He was charming, handsome, and seemed to genuinely care about me. We married shortly after graduation, despite my parents' objections. "You're making a mistake," my mother hissed at me during the reception. "He's not good enough for this family." I ignored her, convinced that for once in my life I'd made the right choice. How wrong I was. The first few years were good. We had 2 beautiful children, Max and Lily, and I started building my dental practice. But as time went on, Tom changed. The charming man I'd fallen in love with disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized. It started with the drinking. A beer or 2 after work became a 6-pack, then a bottle of whiskey. He'd come home late, reeking of alcohol, picking fights over nothing. I endured it for years, hoping he'd change back into the man I'd married. But one night, as I watched him nearly drop our infant daughter while in a drunken stupor, I knew it was over. The divorce was messy, but in the end I got custody of the kids and kept my practice. The day I told my parents about the divorce, I foolishly hoped for some support. Instead, I was met with cold disappointment and blame. "I'm sure you're exaggerating," my mother said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Tom always seemed like such a nice man. You probably drove him to drink with your nagging." That was the last straw. I gathered my children and left, vowing never to seek their approval again. Meanwhile, my sister Emily's life seemed picture perfect. She'd become a psychologist, married a successful businessman named David, and had 2 boys of her own. My parents never missed an opportunity to remind me how much better she was doing. "Emily just bought a new house in that fancy neighborhood," my mother would casually mention during our increasingly rare phone calls. "Her practice is really taking off. It's so nice to have a daughter we can be proud of." Years passed, and I built a successful dental practice. I was doing well financially, even able to buy a nice apartment in a good area of town. Ironically, there were times when my parents would call, asking for money. "Sarah, your father and I are a bit short this month. We were hoping you could help out," my mother would say, her tone sugary sweet. Despite everything, I always sent them what they needed. Part of me hoped that by being generous, they might finally see my worth, but their attitude never changed. One day I received a call from Emily. Our parents had passed away suddenly in a car accident. I was devastated, not just by their loss, but by the realization that we'd never have a chance to reconcile. "I'm in the Maldives with David," Emily said, her voice crackling over the international line. "Could you handle the funeral arrangements? We'll try to get back as soon as we can." So there I was, planning my parents' funeral, while my sister lounged on a beach halfway across the world. I threw myself into the task, determined to give them a beautiful send-off despite our troubled relationship. The day of the funeral arrived, and Emily finally showed up, tanned and seemingly carefree. Right after the funeral, a lawyer approached us. "We need to discuss the will." I hadn't even thought about the will. Surely, despite everything, my parents wouldn't completely forget about me. But as the lawyer read out the details, it became clear that they had done exactly that. Everything. The house, their savings, even family heirlooms, had been left to Emily. There wasn't so much as a mention of my name. As I drove home that day and I made a decision, I was done seeking approval from people who would never give it. I had my children, my career, and my own life. It was time to live it on my terms. After the funeral, my relationship with Emily became even more distant. We rarely spoke, save for obligatory holiday greetings and birthday wishes via Skype. I'd catch glimpses of my nephews, Tommy and Jake, during these calls, but it was hardly enough to form a real relationship with them. From what I could see, the boys were growing up to be quite a handful. During one memorable video call, I watched a 6-year-old Tommy throw a tantrum because Emily wouldn't buy him a new tablet. "But I want it now," he screamed, his face red with anger. Emily just smiled indulgently. "Now, sweetie, we can't always get what we want right away. We'll talk about it later, okay?" I couldn't help but interject. "Emily, don't you think you should be a bit firmer with him? That behavior isn't appropriate for his age." My sister's face hardened. "I'm a psychologist, Sarah. I think I know how to raise my children without causing childhood trauma. They need to feel free to express themselves." As the years went by, my own children grew up and moved out to start their own lives. Max became a successful software engineer, while Lily followed in my footsteps and went to dental school. I was immensely proud of them both. With the kids gone, I found myself enjoying the quiet life of an empty nester. I adopted a cat, Mr. Whiskers, who quickly became my constant companion. My days fell into a comfortable routine of work, home, and the occasional dinner with friends. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, my peaceful life was shattered by a frantic knocking at my door. I opened it to find Emily standing there, mascara running down her face, with Tommy and Jake in tow. "Sarah," she sobbed, "I need your help. David and I had a huge fight, and I just need a place to stay for a while." I hesitated for a moment, remembering all the years of hurt and neglect. But looking at my sister's tear-stained face and the confused expressions of my nephews, I knew I couldn't turn them away. "Come in," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. As they filed into my apartment, I got my first real look at Tommy and Jake in years. Tommy, now 9, had a sullen look on his face, while 6-year-old Jake was bouncing off the walls, touching everything in sight. "Jake, honey, please don't touch that," I said gently as he reached for an antique vase. He ignored me completely, knocking the vase to the floor where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. Emily barely reacted. "Oh, boys will be boys," she said with a weak laugh. "We'll replace it, won't we, Jake?" Jake just shrugged and moved on to the next breakable object. Took a deep breath, reminding myself that they were guests in my home and that this was just temporary. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear that Emily had no intention of leaving anytime soon. My once tidy apartment descended into chaos. Toys and clothes were strewn everywhere, the walls were covered in crayon drawings, and the constant noise was driving me to my wits' end. One particularly trying afternoon, I returned home from a long day at the dental office to find my living room in complete disarray. The floor was littered with toys, crushed snacks, and what appeared to be the stuffing from one of my throw pillows. In the center of it all sat Tani and Jake, gleefully engaged in what looked like a food fight with my good china as ammunition. "Bo! Bo!" I exclaimed, shock and frustration evident in my voice. "What on earth are you doing?" They barely glanced in my direction, continuing their rambunctious play without missing a beat. I looked around frantically for Emily, finally spotting her lounging on the balcony, engrossed in her phone. "Emily?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Have you seen what the boys are doing?" She glanced up briefly, a look of mild annoyance crossing her face. "They're just playing, Sarah. Don't be such a killjoy." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head before speaking again. "Emily, they're destroying my home. This has to stop." Emily rolled her eyes and reluctantly got up from her chair. She sauntered into the living room, surveying the chaos with a disinterested eye. "All right, boys, that's enough for now. Why don't you go watch some TV?" The boys cheered and raced off to the guest room, leaving the mess behind. I stared at my sister in disbelief. "That's it. You're not going to make them clean up?" "Oh, relax," Emily said dismissively. "I'll take care of it later. You're always so uptight, Sarah. It's not good for your blood pressure." As the days wore on, I found myself becoming more and more stressed. The constant noise, the mess, the lack of respect for my home and my rules, it was all taking a toll on me. Even Mr. Whiskers, my usually affectionate cat, had taken to hiding under my bed most of the time, only emerging for food and to use his litter box. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, a task that had somehow fallen solely to me despite Emily and the boys being my guests, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mrs. Johnson, my elderly neighbor from the floor below, standing there with a stern expression on her face. "Dr. Sarah," she began, her voice barely containing her anger, "I've always considered you a model neighbor, but these past few weeks have been unbearable. The noise from your apartment is constant. I can hear screaming and things breaking at all hours of the day and night. What on earth is going on up here?" I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Johnson. My sister and her children are staying with me temporarily, and I'm afraid the boys can be a bit energetic." Mrs. Johnson's expression softened slightly. "I understand children can be lively, dear, but this goes beyond that, and it's not just the noise. Have you seen what they've done to the hallway?" She gestured for me to follow her. We walked to the stairwell, and I gasped in horror. The walls were covered in graffiti, crude drawings, and misspelled words spray-painted in garish colors. I recognized Tommy's handiwork immediately. This is unacceptable," I stammered, mortified. "I had no idea. I'll clean it up right away, Mrs. Johnson, and I promise it won't happen again." "See that it doesn't," she replied firmly. "Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll have to report this to building management and the appropriate authorities." Once she was out of sight, I leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the mess my life had become. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and marched back to my apartment. As I opened the door, I was met with the sound of Tommy and Jake's laughter, punctuated by the crash of something else breaking. "Boys," I said firmly, "turn that off. We have work to do." They ignored me as usual. I strode over and switched off the TV. "Hey," Tommy protested, "we were playing that." "Not anymore," I replied. "You're going to clean up the mess you made in the hallway. Come with me now." Grumbling and whining, they followed me to the stairwell. I handed them scrub brushes and a bucket of soapy water. "Start cleaning," I instructed. They stared at me in disbelief. But Mom said we don't have to do chores." Tommy stammered. "Your mom isn't here right now," I said, "and in my house we clean up our messes." They half-heartedly swiped at the walls, more interested in splashing each other than actually cleaning. I was about to intervene when I heard footsteps on the stairs. To my surprise, it was Mrs. Johnson's son, Mark, in his police uniform. He must have just gotten off duty. "Everything okay here, Dr. Sarah?" he asked, eyeing the boys suspiciously. Sensing an opportunity, I explained the situation. Mark's face hardened as he turned to Tommy and Jake. "Listen up, boys," he said sternly. "Vandalism is a serious offense. If you don't clean this up properly, we're going to have some real problems. Understand?" The boys' eyes widened in fear. They nodded vigorously and began scrubbing the walls with newfound enthusiasm. I was supervising their progress when I heard the elevator ding. Emily stepped out, fresh from a trip to the beauty salon, her hair and nails immaculate. Her jaw dropped when she saw the scene before her. "What the hell is going on here?" she shrieked. I calmly explained the situation, but Emily wasn't having it. "How dare you force my children to do manual labor?" she yelled. "This is cruel and unusual punishment." "Cruel?" I shot back, my patience finally snapping. "Cruel is letting them destroy other people's property without consequences." Emily grabbed the boy's hands. "Come on, we're leaving. I won't let you be subjected to this abuse." The next few days were tense. Emily and the boys stayed, but they barely spoke to me. I was starting to think things couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. I came home from work one afternoon to find my apartment eerily quiet. "Hello," I called out. A pitiful meow answered me. I followed the sound to find Mr. Whiskers huddled in a corner, his fur a startling shade of blue. "Oh my God," I gasped. The poor cat was covered in paint, frantically trying to lick it off. I screamed in horror and anger, scooping up Mr. Whiskers. Wrapping him in a towel, I rushed him to the vet, my heart pounding. The vet's diagnosis was grim. "He's ingested a significant amount of paint," she told me. "We'll need to keep him overnight for treatment." Leaving Mr. Whiskers at the clinic was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I returned home, shaking with fury. Emily was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I explained to her what had happened to Mr. Whiskers, demanding that she discipline the boys and help clean up the mess they'd made. Emily shrugged. "It's just a cat, Sarah. Don't be so dramatic." I couldn't believe my ears. "Just a cat. He could die, Emily." "Well, that's not my problem," she said dismissively. "And neither is the cleaning. It's your apartment after all." The next morning, I arrived at my dental practice earlier than usual, my mind reeling from the events of the past few weeks. With a deep breath, I picked up my phone and dialed David's number. "David, I'm sorry to bother you," I began, "but I need to understand what's going on. Why did you and Emily have a fight? When is she planning to come back home?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then David let out a heavy sigh. "Sarah, I'm afraid Emily won't be coming back. We're getting divorced." David's story came pouring out, each revelation more shocking than the last. He told me how Emily had quit her psychology practice years ago, refusing to work or even help around the house. Their home had fallen into disrepair, and the children were completely out of control. And then there were the vacations. "She'd jet off without me or the kids, using the money from your parents' inheritance. I thought she was just taking some time for herself, but..." His voice trailed off, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "But what, David?" "She was cheating on me, Sarah, multiple times, with different men. God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I had to get a DNA test for the boys. Thankfully, they're mine, but after all that, I just couldn't do it anymore. I filed for divorce and asked her to leave." After finishing the call with David, I sat at my desk, trying to process everything I'd learned. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Emily wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. She was using me as a fallback, a free place to stay while her life fell apart. That evening, I confronted Emily. The boys were in the guest room, engrossed in their video games as usual, while Emily lounged on my couch, scrolling through her phone. "Emily, we need to talk," I said firmly, sitting across from her. "I spoke to David today. Is it true? Are you really getting divorced?" Emily shrugged, an air of indifference about her. "Yeah, it's true. David and I are over. I'm tired of him and his expectations. But don't worry, sis, you'll help me out, right? After all, that's what sisters are for." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Help you out, Emily? You've turned my life upside down? You're not even trying to get back on your feet. What about your inheritance? Surely you can use that to find your own place." She laughed dismissively. "Oh, that money? It's gone, Sarah. There were barely crumbs left anyway." I felt my blood begin to boil. "Crumbs, Emily? Our parents left you over $200,000. How could you possibly have blown through all that money?" Emily just shrugged again, reaching for her phone. "Life's expensive, Sarah. You wouldn't understand." In that moment, something inside me snapped. Years of resentment, weeks of frustration, all came bubbling to the surface. "No, you're the one who doesn't understand," I said, my voice low and controlled. "I've had enough. Get a job, start disciplining the boys, contribute to this household, or get out. You have 1 week, Emily. 1 week to show me you're serious about turning things around." Emily's eyes widened in shock. For the first time since she'd arrived, she seemed to realize I wasn't going to back down. A few days after my ultimatum, I returned home from a long day at the dental office. As I approached my apartment door, I was struck by an unusual silence. No shouting, no crashes, no sounds of destruction. It was peaceful. Wearily, I entered the apartment. "Emily." I called out. No response. I found Tommy and Jake sitting quietly on the couch, their eyes red and puffy as if they'd been crying. My heart sank. "Boys, where's your mother?" I asked gently. Tommy wordlessly handed me a piece of paper with trembling hands. I unfolded it and began to read. "Dear Sarah, I've realized that motherhood just isn't for me. I'm still young, and I want to live my life. I've met someone. He's young, exciting, and doesn't have any baggage. We're leaving town together. You're always going on about responsibility and all that boring stuff, so here's your chance to put your money where your mouth is. The boys are your problem now. You're an old maid anyway, so you might as well be useful and raise them. Don't try to contact me. By the time you read this, I'll be long gone. Emily." I collapsed onto the sofa, my mind reeling. How could she do this? How could she abandon her own children? With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and dialed David's number. When he answered, I could barely get the words out. "David, it's Sarah. You need to come over right away. It's about the boys." Within an hour, David was at my door. I handed him Emily's note without a word. As he read it, his face cycled through shock, anger, and finally a deep sadness. "Oh, boys," he sighed, kneeling down to hug Tommy and Jake. "I'm so sorry." Over the next few hours, David and I talked, trying to figure out what to do. It was clear that the boys needed stability, and David was determined to provide that. "I'll take them home," he said firmly, "and first thing tomorrow I'm going to file for full custody." I nodded, relief washing over me. "I think that's for the best, and David, I'll help in any way I can. I'll testify, provide character witnesses, whatever you need." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. David filed for full custody, and I found myself recounting Emily's behavior to stern-faced judges and social workers. In the end, the decision was swift. Emily, who never even showed up for the hearings, was stripped of her parental rights. David was granted full custody of Tommy and Jake. As the dust settled, I found myself adjusting to a new normal. I visited David and the boys often, marveling at the change in their household. David had hired a part-time nanny to help out, but he was also making a concerted effort to be more present in his sons' lives. One sunny Saturday, about a month after everything had happened, I visited their home. I was amazed to find Tommy setting the table for lunch while Jake was helping David prepare sandwiches in the kitchen. Aunt Sarah, they both cried, running to hug me. I embraced them tightly, noticing how much calmer and happier they seemed. "They're doing so well," I remarked to David as we watched the boys play in the backyard after lunch. "You're doing a great job." 5 years have passed and life has taken unexpected turns. I'm still practicing dentistry, finding fulfillment in my work, and enjoying quiet evenings with Mr. Whiskers, my faithful feline companion. Tommy, now 14, has become something of a local celebrity. His graffiti art, once a source of frustration, has evolved into a genuine talent. He's a popular blogger, showcasing his work online and even getting featured in the news. His success has brought him a decent income, unusual for someone his age. One Sunday afternoon, David and the boys were visiting me for our weekly family dinner. We were catching up on Tommy's latest art project when there was an unexpected knock at the door. To everyone's shock, it was Emily. She barged in, eyes fixed on Tommy. "I hear you're making quite a bit of money now," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "Mommy needs her share." David stepped forward, his face stern. "You have no right to any of it, Emily." He pulled out a document from his wallet. "You were stripped of your parental rights years ago. Leave now or I'm calling the police." Emily's face contorted with anger, but seeing our united front, she turned and left without another word. We haven't seen her since. As for me, I continue to work and enjoy life's simple pleasures. I stay in touch with my own children, now adults themselves, cherishing our relationship. This unexpected journey has taught me the true meaning of family. It's not always about blood, but about love, support, and being there for each other through thick and thin.
I'm a 28-year-old man, married to my wife, Sarah, who's 26. We've been together for 6 years, dating for 4 before getting married, and we've been planning to start a family soon. My relationship with my mother, who's 52, has always been complicated. She raised me and my younger brother Tim, 24, on her own after my dad left when I was 10 and Tim was 6. We struggled financially, and Mom worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, leaving me to care for Tim. I cooked meals and helped him with homework while she worked late. Despite our hardships, I admired her determination. As I grew up, I realized that my mom relied on me emotionally more than she should have. She talked to me about her work and personal problems, even when I was still a teenager. I felt like I had to be strong for her, taking on a lot of responsibility early in life. By the time I was 22 and had my first real job as an entry-level accountant, I started helping her financially. At first, it was small things like buying groceries or paying a bill, and I didn't think much of it. I felt it was my duty after all she'd done for us. When I met Sarah at 24, she worked as a nurse, and we clicked immediately. As we got serious, Sarah noticed how much I was helping my mom and expressed concern. She worried I was enabling my mom's dependence, but I dismissed it at the time, thinking Sarah didn't understand the situation. Over the next few years, as Sarah and I got engaged and married, my financial support for my mom increased. My income was growing, and there always seemed to be a new crisis: car repairs, medical bills. I just couldn't say no. Sarah and I had frequent discussions about it. She worried that my mom was taking advantage of my generosity, and that it might affect our future, especially with our plans to buy a house and start a family. A significant portion of my income was going to help my mom, but I assured Sarah that it was temporary, that Mom just needed help getting back on her feet. 6 months ago, everything shifted. My mom called me, crying, saying she was behind on rent and needed $2,000 to avoid eviction. Without thinking twice, I transferred the money. But a week later, I noticed a strange charge on my bank statement for an online casino. I usually didn't question her expenses, but something felt off this time. After digging into her transactions, I discovered she had used most of the money on gambling. I was furious. When I confronted her, she broke down, admitting she had developed a gambling problem over the past year. She claimed she was trying to win enough money to pay me back and become financially independent. I told her I couldn't continue supporting her if she was going to gamble the money away and insisted she get help. She promised to stop gambling and seek help, and for a couple of months, things seemed to improve. She stopped asking for money, and I thought that tough love had worked. Sarah and I started refocusing on our future, looking at houses and discussing when to start trying for a baby. Then, last week, everything fell apart. Sarah came home from work visibly upset. My mom had called her at the hospital, accusing me of cheating with my ex-girlfriend Lisa. I hadn't spoken to Lisa in years, since we briefly dated in college long before I met Sarah. I was blindsided by the accusation, but what hurt most was that Sarah didn't know what to believe. My mom claimed to have proof in the form of text messages between Lisa and me. I gave Sarah my phone without hesitation, knowing I had nothing to hide. But the damage was already done. The seed of doubt had been planted. Sarah said she needed time to process everything and went to stay with her sister. Now, I'm trying to make sense of why my mom would do this. Is it revenge for cutting off her financial support? Has her gambling addiction driven her to such extremes? I'm caught in the middle, not knowing how to fix it. I love my mom, but I'm starting to see how toxic our relationship has been. At the same time, I'm terrified of losing Sarah, the woman I want to spend my life with. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since this all happened, and things have only gotten worse. Sarah hasn't come home, and we've barely spoken aside from a few texts. She's made it clear she's not ready to talk face to face. In one of her messages, she said she's unsure what to believe anymore. That hit me hard. After 6 years of trust, it's been shattered by my mom's lies, and I don't know how to rebuild it. I confronted my mom about the accusations. At first, she denied everything, saying she was only looking out for me. But the more I pressed her, the more her story unraveled. After hours of back and forth, my mom finally admitted she had made up the entire story. Her explanation: she believed Sarah was going to leave me eventually and thought she was protecting me by trying to break us up first. I was in disbelief. How could she do something so cruel? When I asked her, she couldn't seem to grasp the seriousness of her actions. It turned out she had fabricated the text messages she claimed to have. Using an old phone I'd given her years ago, she created fake conversations and showed screenshots to Sarah. The level of deception was staggering. I've decided to cut off all contact with my mom for now. She continues to call and text, alternating between apologies and trying to justify her actions, but I'm not responding. I need to focus on saving my relationship with Sarah. My brother Tim, surprisingly, has been a source of support. When I finally told him what happened, he wasn't as shocked as I expected. He revealed that he had stopped talking to Mom months ago after she borrowed money from him and gambled it away, just like she did with me. Tim shared some stories of his own that shed light on how manipulative our mom has been over the years. He mentioned times when she pitted us against each other or invented emergencies to get money or attention. Comparing notes with him has opened my eyes to the patterns in her behavior. I've been reflecting a lot on my relationship with my mom and realizing how much she's used guilt and emotional manipulation to keep me tethered to her. I'm angry. At her, but also at myself for not seeing it sooner. Sarah had tried to warn me, but I wasn't ready to listen. A few days ago, Sarah's sister reached out to say that Sarah is still deeply hurt, but is considering talking things through. I'm hopeful, but I know there's no quick fix for this kind of betrayal. I've been thinking about what I want to say to Sarah when we finally talk. I'd want her to know I'm committed to setting clear boundaries with my mom and that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild our trust. But I'm scared it might be too late. In the meantime, I've been keeping busy. I've thrown myself into work, started therapy to work through my family issues, and even joined a support group for people with family members struggling with gambling addictions. It's been helpful to talk to others who understand what I'm going through. I'm also thinking about what my relationship with my mom might look like in the future, if we have one at all. I know I can't cut her off entirely. She's still my mom, and I worry about her. But I also know I can't keep enabling her behavior or letting her interfere in my life. This entire ordeal has made me realize how much I've neglected my own needs. I've always been focused on taking care of everyone else, and now, as I face the possibility of losing my marriage, I'm confronting some hard truths about the choices I've made. I hope Sarah will be willing to work through this with me, but I'm also preparing myself for the possibility that she won't. Either way, I know I have a lot of work to do on myself and my relationships. I just hope it's not too late to save the most important one. Update 2. It's been another month, and I wish I had better news. Sarah finally agreed to meet with me last week. We went for a walk in the park near our house, a place we used to spend a lot of time together. As soon as I saw her, I could tell something had changed. She seemed distant, avoiding eye contact. We made small talk about work and the weather, but it felt strange to discuss such mundane things with so much unresolved between us. Finally, Sarah got to the real reason for our meeting. She told me she'd been doing a lot of thinking. While she believed I hadn't cheated on her, the fact that my mom was able to cause such chaos in our relationship made her feel vulnerable. She feared that even if we reconciled, my mom would always be a problem in our lives. I reassured her that I'd cut off contact with my mom and was committed to maintaining strong boundaries. I told her about my therapy and the support group I joined. But Sarah said it wasn't just about my mom anymore. This situation had made her question whether we were truly right for each other. She brought up past arguments about my family and how she'd always felt like she came second. She said she still loved me, but she wasn't sure if love was enough to overcome all the issues we faced. Hearing Sarah say these things was incredibly painful. I wanted to argue, to tell her we could work through anything together, but I could see in her eyes that she had already made up her mind. Sarah suggested we take some time apart to think about what we truly want. She proposed a trial separation of 3 months. During this time, we would live separately and limit our contact. At the end of the 3 months, we would reassess and decide whether to work on our relationship or end it for good. I agreed to the separation, even though it was the last thing I wanted. It felt like I was losing my best friend and partner, but I knew that pushing Sarah to stay would only make things worse. We spent the next hour discussing the logistics. She would continue staying with her sister while I stayed in our apartment. We worked out how to manage our shared finances and agreed only to contact each other if absolutely necessary. As we said goodbye, Sarah hesitated, squeezed my hand, and told me she was sorry it had come to this. It took every ounce of strength not to break down right there. Since that meeting, I've been trying to focus on myself. I've continued therapy and picked up new hobbies to keep my mind occupied. I joined a local hiking group and have been spending more time outdoors, which has helped clear my head. Meanwhile, dealing with the fallout from cutting off contact with my mom has been another challenge. She's been spreading lies to family and friends, claiming Sarah left me because she couldn't handle our family. It's frustrating, but I'm trying to stay above it and not engage. Tim has kept me updated on our mom's situation, and apparently, she's still gambling and asking other family members for money. It's hard to hear, but it reassures me that setting boundaries was the right decision. As the days pass, I swing between hope and despair. Part of me believes this time apart will help Sarah see that we can overcome this obstacle together. But another part of me is terrified that she'll realize she's happier without me. For now, all I can do is focus on becoming a better version of myself. Whether Sarah and I end up together or not, I need to address my own issues and learn to set healthier boundaries. It's a tough journey, but I'm committed to seeing it through. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I'm writing this with a heavy heart. Sarah and I are officially separated. After the trial separation, we met to discuss our future, and it became clear that the trust between us had been irreparably damaged. We tried couples counseling for a few sessions, hoping a professional could help us work through our issues. We talked about the impact my mom's actions had on our relationship, but we also uncovered deeper problems that we had been ignoring. Sarah shared that she had always felt like she was competing with my family for my attention and loyalty. Even before the incident with my mom, she had been unhappy with how much of our resources, both financial and emotional, were being directed towards my family. I realized I had been so focused on trying to take care of everyone else that I had neglected my relationship with Sarah. I thought I was doing the right thing by helping my family, but now I see that it came at the cost of my marriage. After much discussion and soul-searching, we both agreed that the best thing for us was to go our separate ways. It was an incredibly difficult decision, but we both felt it was necessary for our individual growth and happiness. We've begun the process of dividing our assets and working out the logistics of our separation. It's been challenging, but we're trying to keep things amicable. We've agreed to minimal contact for now to give each other space to heal. As for my mom, I still haven't spoken to her since everything happened. Tim keeps me updated, and it seems she still doesn't grasp the gravity of what she did. She's convinced herself that I'll eventually forgive her and that things will return to normal. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. In the meantime, I've been focusing on rebuilding my life. I moved into a new apartment and am establishing new routines. Therapy is helping me work through my family issues, and I'm learning to set healthier boundaries. Work has been a welcome distraction, and I've taken on new projects at the accounting firm that keep me busy. I've also reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage. This journey has been full of ups and downs. Some days I feel optimistic about the future and excited about the possibilities ahead. Other days, the loneliness and regret hit hard, and I find myself missing Sarah and the life we had planned together. But I'm taking it one day at a time and focusing on personal growth. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I'm done letting other people's problems control my life. It's a painful lesson, but one I needed to learn. For now, I'm working on finding a balance between supporting my family and taking care of myself. It's not easy, but I'm committed to creating a healthier, more fulfilling life. The evening air was rich with the aroma of roasted chicken as Maria and I hosted a family dinner in our warm suburban home. The table was beautifully set, candles flickered gently, and a soft murmur of conversation filled the room. Our closest friends, Mike and Jenna, had joined us along with my mother, Eleanor. Maria, glowing with excitement, shared the news as we sat down to eat. "We're expecting a baby," she announced, her smile brighter than I had ever seen. Mike and Jenna cheered, raising their glasses in celebration. "That's wonderful news." Eleanor's voice carried a strained enthusiasm, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She reached out to pat Maria's hand, the gesture feeling hesitant. As the evening wore on, I noticed Eleanor's smile falter when she thought no one was watching. At one point, she whispered something to Maria, too quiet for me to hear, but I saw Maria's smile waver just for a second. The night was filled with laughter and stories, but as the sun set, Eleanor's mood seemed to darken. After dinner, as we cleared the table, Maria, tired from her pregnancy, excused herself and headed upstairs to rest. Eleanor followed, saying she needed to use the bathroom. Then came a loud thud, followed by a scream. My heart froze. I raced upstairs to find Maria crumpled at the bottom of the stairs, her face twisted in pain. Eleanor stood nearby, pale and trembling. "It was an accident, David." She slipped. She stammered, her hands shaking. Maria clutched her abdomen, her voice barely above a whisper. No, David, she pushed me. She said this child should never have been conceived. As Mike dialed 911, Jenna and I rushed to comfort Maria. The sound of distant sirens echoed in the night, but the storm inside me was far louder. My mind struggled to process what had just happened, the horror of realizing the hatred my own mother had concealed. When the paramedics arrived, Maria was carefully placed on a stretcher, her hand gripping mine tightly. I made a silent vow as she was wheeled toward the ambulance. No matter what, I would protect my family. Eleanor watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable as the distance between us grew into a chasm I knew would never be bridged. In the sterile light of the hospital, I paced beside Maria's bed, the steady beeping of the monitor a small comfort that our unborn child was safe. The doctors reassured us Maria would physically recover, but the emotional wounds were harder to heal. The image of her falling, of Eleanor standing over her, haunted every quiet moment. A few days later, I returned home to gather some of Maria's belongings. In the attic, I stumbled upon a stack of old letters. As I read through them, the words on the pages made my stomach turn. They were from my mother, written to an old friend, filled with disdain for my marriage to Maria. She had expressed her desire to prevent the birth of her mixed-race grandchild, her words dripping with hatred. Armed with the letters, I confronted Eleanor. She sat in her usual chair by the fireplace, a book forgotten on her lap. Her eyes, once warm, were now cold barriers. I held the letters up, my hands shaking. Why, Mom? How could you? Eleanor took the letters, her hands trembling as she read aloud her own words. I did it for us, David. For our family's future. To protect our legacy. Our legacy? I nearly choked on the words. There is no legacy worth preserving if it's built on hate. Eleanor's face crumbled as she tried to reach out. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I could change things, make you see. See what? That your prejudice is justified. My voice rose, incredulous. No, Mom. I can't let you hurt my family anymore. Eleanor's tears flowed as I turned to leave, her cries fading into the background as I packed a bag for Maria. The drive back to the hospital was a blur, the city lights flashing. As I grappled with the betrayal, word of what Eleanor had done began to spread through the community. Neighbors who once greeted her warmly now crossed the street to avoid her, and her friends from the book club stopped calling. The isolation that surrounded her was of her own making, and though harsh, it was necessary. At the hospital, Maria began to wake. I held her hand, the connection between us stronger now, forged in the fires of what we had endured. We'll get through this, I promised, my voice steady, a vow not just for the present, but for the future and our growing family. The decisions we faced were difficult, distancing ourselves from Eleanor. But they were necessary. Our focus was on healing, on rebuilding. Eleanor's choices had led her down a path of loneliness and regret, and as hard as it was to accept, we had to move forward. For us, for our child, for our future. In the quiet sanctuary of our home, Maria's strength amazed me. Though she was still recovering, her resolve was clear. We can't let her hurt anyone else, she said, her voice firm with determination. Together, we crafted a plan to bring Eleanor's actions to light. We reached out to a well-known local journalist, one known for her integrity and commitment to social justice. Over the phone, Maria recounted our story, her voice steady but heavy with the pain of betrayal. The journalist was intrigued and sympathetic, agreeing to meet. Preparation for the interview became our shared mission. We gathered the hateful letters, documented Maria's injuries, and collected messages of support from neighbors and acquaintances who had witnessed or experienced Eleanor's prejudice. Our friends Mike and Jenna stood by us, helping us organize the evidence. You're doing the right thing, Jenna said as she helped sort through emails. Mike nodded in agreement. It's time her true colors were shown to everyone. The day of the interview arrived. Miss Hammond, the journalist, set up her recorder in our living room, her demeanor professional yet compassionate. Maria spoke first, recounting the incident, the discovery of the letters, and the impact of Eleanor's actions on our lives. I followed, sharing my perspective, my voice heavy with the weight of a son's betrayal. I never imagined my own mother could harbor such hatred, I admitted, the gravity of the situation hanging in the air. Miss Hammond listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that cut straight to the heart of the matter. When the interview concluded, she packed up her equipment and promised, "I'll make sure your story is heard. You're not just speaking for yourselves, but for everyone she's hurt." The article went live a few days later, its impact immediate and explosive. Local media picked it up first, and soon after, national outlets followed. Eleanor's racist actions, once hidden behind closed doors, were now exposed for all to see. The community's reaction was swift. People who had once respected her were now her harshest critics. Her reputation, built over decades, crumbled overnight. Eleanor reached out to us, her messages filled with a mix of apologies and pleas for understanding. But the damage was done. Her standing in the community was shattered, her social circles closed off, and the public outrage ensured she could no longer wield her prejudice without consequence. Maria and I watched as the story unfolded, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over us. We had exposed the poison that had festered in the shadows, but it had come at the cost of a family torn apart. Yet, in this newfound quiet, we found our strength. Our commitment to each other was renewed, our bonds unbreakable, and our resolve to protect our family stronger than ever. The weeks following the article were tumultuous, but it was necessary. Eleanor, once a respected figure in our community, now faced the harsh reality of her actions. Neighbors who once greeted her with smiles turned away in disgust, unable to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with her revealed prejudices. Her friends distanced themselves, unwilling to endure the social ostracism that came with being associated with her. She eventually put her house on the market, the forlorn for sale sign standing stark against the manicured lawn, a symbol of her precipitous fall from grace. Amidst these upheavals, Maria and I made a decision for our future. We packed our belongings, hearts heavy but hopeful, and moved to a new city, one celebrated for its diversity and inclusive spirit. Here, we found open arms and welcoming hearts, a community that accepted us without hesitation. Our neighbors celebrated the richness of diversity, understanding that the fabric of a community is strengthened by its varied hues, not in spite of them. Inspired by our experiences and the lessons we had learned, Maria and I became advocates for racial tolerance and family safety. We spoke at community centers and schools, sharing our story, not to reopen old wounds, but to prevent others from enduring similar pain. Our message was clear. Hate, if allowed to fester, can destroy families and communities, but awareness, empathy, and proactive kindness can heal and protect. As our new life took root, we welcomed the birth of our child, a beautiful, healthy baby boy. Holding him in my arms in the quiet of the nursery, with Maria resting beside me, I felt the weight and lightness of our journey. In this peaceful room, with the soft hum of a city that embraced all, I reflected on the painful but necessary path we had walked. Cutting ties with my mother was the hardest decision I had ever made, but as I looked down at my son, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful slumber, I knew it was the right one. We had chosen a future where love wasn't bound by blood or biased by heritage. A future where our son could grow up knowing that his worth wasn't tied to the color of his skin, but to the content of his character. In this new beginning, I found closure. The pain of the past, while not forgotten, was now overshadowed by the joy of the present and the promise of the future. We had stepped away from the toxicity to protect what was most precious: our family, our future. As our son grew, he would learn of our journey, not as a tale of sorrow, but one of strength, of the unyielding power of love over hate. In the quiet moments between the soft coos and gentle smiles of our child, Maria, and I shared a look of deep understanding. We had weathered the storm and, in its wake, found not just survival, but life, thriving, unabashed, and unafraid. Now that our story has come to a close, I leave you with a question. Do you believe cutting ties with family is justified if it means protecting your own? It was not a decision David and Maria made lightly, and it's a reality many might face under extreme circumstances. What would you do in their shoes? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.